Eric, I know it was kind of a difficult result here. How do you kind of look at things in this game and how it ends your season at the same time?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little microcosm of our season, I would say,
Mm.
in that we were super competitive. We were in the game all the way through. Restricted them to very little in the way that we do typically. Certainly had the better chances of the game, I would say, if only by a little, but have come out on the wrong side of a game that was decided on very fine margins, and I think that's been the case for most of the year. And in some senses, I'm really proud of how well over the course of this season, in every game, we've been able to compete. Probably stripping away just one in the Chicago game after we play 120 minutes on the Wednesday beforehand. I think that's probably the only game that we haven't really been in all the way through, and we've obviously been incredibly consistent over the course of this season in not losing back-to-back games in the league, and finding a very competitive, if not very fluid and high level version of ourselves almost every week. And I think with where we are, that's a really important thing. And I think that game reflected that today. It was as expected, I would say, in terms of the balance of play. You're playing against a team that dominates the ball against every MLS team they play, and they're playing at home in front of a rowdy 35,000, and it was a really good atmosphere, great challenge for our players, and that set the course for the game, I would say. But we were really detailed, really precise, showed loads of conviction in how we defended, and we had some really good chances as the game wore on. So I think there's that sense of real frustration, sense of sort of realism, I suppose, with where we're at and how that game reflects the entirety of the year. But then also some real pride, and we're certainly leaving here feeling like we've taken some big steps forward over the course of this year, really moved the club forward, and we're not leaving with the same feeling that we had in the semi-final last year as we left LA. So I'm pretty capable of looking at these things fairly objectively, even in the immediate aftermath of it. And I certainly will look back with a lot of pride as to how we got to this stage and then how we've competed today. And I think on another day we find ourselves through, and we feel phenomenal about where we've got to as a team and where we've got to as a club.
You mentioned missed chances, one of those being Robin Lutz, where Pilcher just came out of nowhere to make that save. How do you feel about that save and about Robin Lutz's chance there?
Yeah, I mean, Robin did really well to make the chance in the first instance and showed some real composure to get it back on his left foot. And again, it's an incredibly fine margin that sees the ball out rather than in, and sometimes that is the game, isn't it? Ball goes in one day, you're through and you feel fantastic. Ball doesn't go in today, and we're getting asked some very, very different questions to the ones that we might. So I can't criticize Rob in that moment. It's a phenomenal clearance, and certainly a moment that we will look back on and feel like it was one that the game hinged on, in hindsight, in that there's sort of very little either way after that chance. And that is the nature of the game, and the fine margins that we've talked about at this stage of the competition.
When it comes to Anders Dreyer's goal, is that one that you take your hat off and kind of doff your cap to, or you point to something defensively on that one?
No, no, actually, it is in one sense, in that he's a difference maker, isn't he? That's what they pay the money for. That's what he's done all season for them, and certainly when he's given the amount of space that he was in that moment, he can be, and typically is, very ruthless. But I think it will be a goal that, as we look back in the cold light of the analysis at some point, we'll be really frustrated with, because it comes from an instant that we've talked about a lot in the build up to this game, and up until 70 minutes defended those moments really, really well. But the point at which the ball goes over the back line's head and we switch off, we don't recover the space that he ultimately scores from, is an example of one of those fine margins and the details that we typically execute at a really high level, but are found wanting on occasion when it comes to our ability to do so for 90 minutes. So that's frustrating, and I think it probably speaks to where we are, that in these games we have to be perfect from a defensive perspective. We have to give ourselves a platform to win the game by not committing. I wouldn't say it's a basic error. I think that there are lots of layers of detail to making sure that situation doesn't arise, but errors that we shouldn't, given our setup, given the messages that the group gets rammed down their throat, and the type of team we are, I suppose. So it's a really frustrating goal to give away, but it's obviously a moment of real quality and conviction, and the only moment of that nature over the course of the game from both teams.
How do you feel about your team's response to Dreyer's goal after that?
I think we gave it a really good go. We didn't create anything clean cut, but I felt like we were able to wrestle some momentum back, and we finished with certainly a flurry of real energy and intent, and made changes off the bench with that in mind. And whilst we couldn't create anything really clean cut that got us back in the game, it certainly wasn't for want of trying. And again, we've got a group of players that know how to bounce back. We've got a group of players that are incredibly resilient and have shown that in most situations where we find ourselves behind over the course of this year, and no more so than the previous game against Seattle. So I can't fault the response, and I would say, yeah, it's a really tough one to swallow, but I can only be positive about most of the performance there.
Eric, how much of a turning point was it, the selling of Tanny, and what that meant for the trajectory of what this season could be?
I think it's very difficult to say otherwise. I think I'm not gonna pull the wool over anyone's eyes, I suppose, by speaking about it differently, but I haven't wanted to dwell on that. We haven't talked about it internally all that much. Obviously, don't talk about that type of thing with the players, and we have wanted to be super positive, constructive, and we have found a way in spite of the fact that we've lost a very obvious key component of our team, our style, the way in which we've been successful up until this point. We've found a way to grind through that, and we've been adaptable, and we found ourselves at this stage of the competition, which is, it's not easy to do. We've hit the semi-finals 2 years in a row, and in no small part due to how we've adapted to Tanny's loss, and we haven't been the same threat. Of course, we. As you guys well know, designed a lot of the playing style around having those qualities on the last line. But it yeah, there's the obvious question marks with timing that are presented by the window and everything that's gone with that, and the brilliance of the opportunity for Tanny. And I think since he's gone there, we've been incredibly sort of proud as a club, I suppose, and a group of people that worked with him, to see the platform that he had here, how he grabbed it by the scruff of the neck, used it, what he's gone on to do there. But of course, it was tough for us. But I don't think any of us have been feeling sorry for ourselves. Tanny being here tonight doesn't necessarily put us in a better position, but of course it is an obvious point that you would look at in the course of the season that did at least make it slightly more bumpy.
With the off season just around the corner now, really, how are you looking at the team heading into 2026?
I think that's a club-wide issue. I suppose it extends far beyond just my say, just my influence. But we've obviously got the basis of a really competitive team. We of course want to evolve. We want to move the style on. We want to move the club's ability to be consistently very competitive at the top. And that will, of course, require improvement. I think we would be a club, I think, that would want to improve in every window. There are obviously some big decisions to make on players from our perspective, from their perspective, and that will gradually fall into place. And I think to have done what we've done, to be in the position we're in over the course of 2 seasons, to make the playoffs relatively comfortable, to improve in our league position, to hit the semi-finals twice in 2 years, we will be the envy of a lot of clubs in that sense. But we want to make sure we're doing that with always that sense of progression, not resting on our laurels, no sense of complacency, really capitalizing on the position that we've got ourselves in. And there are, of course, some things that would help us develop the style, help us become a team that is more comfortable over the course of the year. But I wouldn't swap what we've built over the course of these 2 years here. I've loved it as a coach. I feel like it's really developed me and my staff, and we've loved working with the group of players. They're a really honest group of players, and we feel like as a group, us players, staff, and everyone that's around that, we can find solutions to problems. We can find a way of making our group far more competitive than our means and spend and those types of things would suggest. And that's a great challenge and one that I've loved leading, and I feel like it's brought the best out in me, and I will look back in the 2 years over the 2 years and feel like I've developed at every step of the way in the way that I hope the group has.
I had two more quick ones about the game. What happened with Mickey Veras at halftime?
Oh, it was a pretty run-of-the-mill incident. I was complaining about something, he was complaining about something, and yeah, it probably got to a point that it doesn't typically, certainly with me. So yeah, nothing to write home about, I wouldn't say.
On the broadcast, they said there was a shove. Did you shove him?
I wouldn't describe it as a shove. It was
Okay.
more measured than that.
Okay. And then when it comes to the substitutions, obviously they score in the 72nd. You didn't sub until I think a dozen minutes later. What was kind of going on to kind of when those subs came?
Yeah, I mean, they came late, partly to do with the run of play. It took us 3 or 4 minutes to decide on how we wanted to attack it specifically. It's not always as straightforward as going from a back five to a back four, making the maybe the obvious changes, because I feel like sometimes you lose a lot of balance. You can sometimes within the shape uh, do more good by making some subtle changes, but we obviously opted to shift to a back four, and I think they would have been on within 5 or 6 minutes had it not been for the balance of play. And obviously at that point where you're only a goal behind, and with possibly sort of 15, 16 minutes to play by the time you account for added time, you also want to make sure everything's buttoned up on the sideline. You don't want to be sending players on without them knowing exactly what they're doing on set play moments, because one can become two very quickly, and then you're out of the game. So it was a combination of us deliberating a little bit. It was a combination and making sure that instructions were right, and then the balance of play. So yeah, it was frustrating. I would have liked to have had them on a couple of minutes earlier, but I don't think it had a bearing on the game.
It works
All
for me.
right.
Thanks for the time, Eric.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate your time.
No,
Safe
likewise.
travels.
Bye bye.